Good afternoon. I'm Chris Ely, the Research Director at GBTA, and I want to welcome all of you to attend our event in Mexico City. I know we wish we could be there with you. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights from GBTA research with my colleague, Mark Sheroff. We're going to be sharing some insights around our annual reports around the BTI, or the Business Travel Index, as well as the pricing forecast. And we're going to take a look at what's happening globally with some trends, and then taking a closer look at how that impacts Latin America and what's happening with Latin America. So again, we're going to have the two main topic points: our Business Travel Index and our pricing forecast, also known as the Global Business Travel Forecast. And I want to thank our sponsors for these two signature research studies that were released in November at our convention in Orlando, Florida. CWT sponsored the Global Business Travel Forecast, and HRS sponsored the Business Travel Index. And we want to thank both of those organizations for their generous support. Now we're going to start with the Global Business Travel Index. Many of you, just to let everybody know or remind people, what is the Business Travel Index? And this is our 13th annual study of our BTI. It looks at all types of measurements of demand measurements of business travel and all types of business trips and spending. And it looks at the data from an input and output approach that kind of mirrors, or seeks to mirror, travel and expense, which is on par with other aspects of forecast, including labor, material, and other business inputs. It looks at travel spend by different industry sectors, and it projects, looking at the global economy, it derives projections on travel supply capacity, policy issues, and other public dynamics that impact business travel. And it looks at 73 countries, and it takes an in-depth look at 44 industries that members do have access to. There's a supplemental, more detailed follow-up folder that is available for purchase called our Data Cube. And we also, in this year, recently added some new perspective of including surveys of global business travelers themselves, as well as financial executives, to try and get some more perspective on how they see willingness to travel, spend, where they think it's going to be going in the future. So that's just some background about our BTI. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Sheroff, our research manager here at GBTA, who's going to walk us through the BTI. So Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. So we're going to talk about the BTI, which is our flagship research report. And what this does is it estimates business travel spending around the world. And this includes all types of spending. So obviously, flights, hotels, and car rentals, but also meals, and incidentals and stuff like that. So it's a really far-reaching and comprehensive measure of how much people are spending on business trips. And the data you see on your screen here, this is from 2020. So we picked this because we wanted to show how the pandemic impacted business travel. And what we see is that business travel fell to $661 billion worldwide in 2020. And before that, it was 1.4 trillion. So it fell 54% during the peak of the pandemic. And then I'd like to draw your attention to Latin America. So you go back to 2020, Latin America accounted for 4% of global business travel spending. But what we saw during the pandemic was that Latin America did slightly better than the rest of the world. So, business travel suffered in every region, but Latin America did a little bit better. So global business travel spending decreased 54% in 2020. Latin America, it only decreased 50%. And then 2021, we started to see some recovery. Global business travel spending increased 14% in 2021. But Latin America, it increased 18%. So during the pandemic, Latin America has fared a little bit better than other regions when it comes to business travel. But, if we look at our forecast for the next 5 years, we're a little less optimistic about Latin America than other regions. So if we move on, this next slide sort of shows what I've been talking about. And I want to, point out the impact of the pandemic. Business travel decreased 52%, during the worst part of the pandemic. And to put this in perspective, this is more than 6 times greater the magnitude of the Great Recession. So during the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, global business travel spending went down 8%. But during COVID, it went down 52%. So the impact of COVID is more than 6 times worse the last big crisis. So it's really had a terrible impact. But, looking ahead, we expect business travel to average 20% growth over the next 5 years. So it will make up a lot of the ground that's been lost during the pandemic. Okay, moving on. This isn't about business travel spending. What this shows is PMIs, which is sort of like a survey that measures economic activity. And what we see, if you look at 2021, is that globally, the economy was doing really well last year, but business travel was not. And that's because a lot of companies have policies that are restricting travel. But I think this is good news because when companies start traveling again, there's a lot of economic activity and there's a lot of pent-up demand for business travel. So I think we're going to see business travel make a stronger comeback than a lot of people expect. Okay, moving on. What this shows is the correlation between vaccination and expected business travel performance over the next couple of years. And, you can see that there's some correlation where, like the more vaccinated countries are expected to do a little bit better, but it's not really that strong. Okay, I want to take a detour because, when you're talking about business travel spending, one of the most important things now is whether companies allow business travel. If a company is not allowing business travel because of the pandemic, they can't really spend money on business travel. So the data you see here, this is from our regular poll where we go out and we poll our members about how they're doing with the pandemic. And this is global data. But what we see worldwide is that 73% of companies are allowing at least some non-essential business travel. But only 47% are usually allowing it. So, a lot of companies are allowing some travel, but they're not allowing the same amount of travel as they did before the pandemic. And then you look at international travel, which is the second bar here. And most companies still don't allow this. So 52% never or rarely allow international travel. And I think that's because of safety concerns around the pandemic, but also you still have a lot of requirements. Like, when you're traveling, you have to be vaccinated, you have to get tested before you go. So international travel is still difficult, and we don't see a lot of international business travel. Okay, moving on. I want to talk longer term about what business travel will look like coming out of the pandemic. And, we hear a lot of people saying that it will never come back to what it was. People have gotten used to doing meetings on Zoom, and there's no longer this expectation that you have to go out if you're a salesperson and visit your clients. So the question is, will business travel ever fully return? And this is from our coronavirus poll. 68% of our members want to travel as much as they did before the pandemic. So a large majority of people want to get back on the road and travel as much as they were doing before. And then, we also had a question in another survey where we asked people, how long will it take for business travel to return to what it was before the pandemic? And what's really interesting about this is that people in Latin America were a lot more optimistic than other regions. So 76% of Latin American-based respondents expect that business travel will fully recover within a year. And this is much higher than other regions. So I think that that's a good sign. If you work in business travel in Latin America, there's a lot more optimism that things will get back to normal. And I think, people are eager to get back on the road. Okay, so I want to talk about, the BTI a little bit more. We're going to break it down by country. So what you see here, these are the top 10 business travel markets in the world. China is number one, and we project that it will have business travel spending of $337 billion in 2022. And the US is the second biggest market. And these are a lot bigger than the other markets. When you look at Latin America, Brazil is the 10th biggest business travel market in the world. And you don't see all of them here, but I pulled out the other Latin America markets. So Mexico is the 22nd largest business travel market. Colombia is the 35th largest market. Peru, the 39th largest. Chile is the 40th largest business travel market. Argentina is the 47th largest business travel market. So you have a lot of Latin America markets. You have 6 of them that are in the top 50 in terms of business travel spending worldwide. Okay, and then we look here at like the global trend in terms of travel spending. Obviously 2020 was a bad year because of the pandemic. Business travel spending went down 54%. But we've started to see some recovery. Last year, it recovered 14%. And this year, we expect to have a really good year where business travel spend will increase almost 40% worldwide. And then, I want to draw your attention to the year 2024. 2024 is the year when we project that business travel will return to what it was before the pandemic. So we expect a full recovery in the next 3 years. And 2024 will be the year where business travel spend exceeds what it was in 2019. Okay, moving on. One of the cool things about the BTI is that we can also break it out by industry and see how much different industries spend on business travel. And this is the global picture. The largest industry is manufacturing. And they spend $371 billion on business travel. And then you can see the other industries. The top 10 industries spend almost $1 trillion on business travel and are expected to this year. So the top 10 industries really dominate all business travel spending. Okay, I want to switch gears and talk a little more about Latin America specifically and what business travel looks like there. So these are the top industries in Latin America in terms of business travel spending. And it's pretty similar to what we see worldwide. Manufacturing, number 1, utilities, number 2, administrative and support services, number 3. And you look at these top 10 industries, they spend $40 billion on business travel in Latin America. Okay, moving on, I want to talk about Latin America a little more closely. And let me gather my notes here. So, the pandemic hurt business travel in Latin America, but not as much as other regions. I mentioned this earlier. 2020, business travel declined 50% in Latin America. So it went from $50 billion to $25 billion. And then, 2021, it increased 18%. So it went to $30 billion. And this year, we expect that it will do even better, and it will reach $37 billion in 2022. So, we've made up a lot of ground from the pandemic. And then, we're looking at 2024 to 2025, and that's when, business travel will really return to what it was before the pandemic in Latin America. And then I have some notes here. What we're seeing is that it's a different story for different markets. So you have three markets that have done, worse than the others. These are Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. These markets really saw a decline in 2020, and they did poorly last year as well. But then you have other markets that are doing a lot better. And these are Mexico, Colombia, and Peru. These markets saw business travel decline in 2020, but then they recovered nicely last year. So there's sort of a split when you look at the top six markets. Mexico, Colombia, and Peru have been doing better than Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. Okay, moving on, you can see the business travel spend and how it breaks down between different countries. And, Brazil and Mexico really dominate spending in the region. So, Brazil has business travel spending of $18 billion, Mexico, $7 billion. And you add these together, and these two countries make up 70% of the business travel spending in the region.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the pricing forecast and look at our forecast around what is pricing going to look like. We're going to look at it sometimes by global and then look at it by region as well in Latin America. And so let's start with our outlook for airfare, what we're seeing or what our forecast is for airfare. When we look at seat capacity, every market or every region of the world there's a deficit in terms of the available seats compared to 2019. So as airlines have taken planes out of the skies, so to speak, and parked them, we see a decline in terms of the available seats simply because the traffic and demand is not necessarily there consistently across the board. And in Latin America, we see that the number of available seats, November 19 versus November 21, is down by about 17%, which is, smaller than some markets, but still quite high. And looking at global airfares, we see directionally that fares did decline significantly in 2021. So, and we're seeing slight uptick, but still not as high globally as the average were back in 2018, 2019, and even parts of 2020. And they're down for three reasons, which we call out here. They're lower prices. The shift of travel, airfare is more domestic, largely, as opposed to more of a mix between international and domestic. And also we see a shift between premium seats to economy seats, premium seats being traditionally purchased by business travelers or by companies, but we're seeing a shift to more economy seats. And we're going to speak to that in just a minute as to maybe some reasons as to why that might be. But spend on premium airfare seats have declined. And we see here that about 22% of airfares in Latin America were premium, compared to about 32% in 2018, 2019. So again, it's at about 68% capacity, looking at how the fares are differentiated or split from 2021 to 2019. And then looking at the average economy fares, We see here also the same trend that we saw globally in Latin America, which we have here below, and the average economy fare in Latin America. In the 2018-2019, it hovered around $400 US. This year, we're expecting to come in at about $350, $349. So there's slowly but surely some pickup, but it's going to take some time, we think, before we'll see those airfare prices reach what they were back in 2019, which I think mirrors what we're seeing in most regions of the world. What about for accommodations and hotels? Let's take a look at that for a moment. And we see here that business hotel rates, are expected to rise in 2022, rise about 13% after a decline in 2021 of about almost 18%. So slowly but surely, we're seeing an increase again in pricing for hotel. I think some of the trends that we're also seeing in several parts of the world are shifts in composition in terms of where business travelers are going, where are meetings being held. In many parts of the world, they're not always being held in large urban areas, maybe due to concerns about pandemic and disease spreading. So maybe more meetings and conferences or other properties, maybe mid-tier markets or outside of big cities, which does impact pricing as well. We're seeing a shift in terms of from upscale more to mid-scale rooms. So we'll see if we start back in 2018, about 47% of rooms were upscale, about a little bit more than half, 53, were mid-scale. But look at where we're at in 2021. 30% of rooms booked were upscale compared to 70% of rooms that are more mid-scale. There are lots of reasons why this is occurring. I've touched on some of them, maybe by location, but also we're seeing some shifts in many parts of the world in terms of how people are traveling. There is a growing trend to combine personal or holidays with business trips, which might change the shift to more mid-scale rooms as opposed to upscale, because the trip is not always purely business travel. It's business plus holiday in some cases. So that explains some of the shift to more mid-scale rooms as opposed to upscale. But we're seeing in Latin America room rates again increasing slowly but surely from a low of about $67 on average in 2021 to we forecast up to about almost $80.50 US in 2023. That's still below what we saw in 2020, 2019, and 2018. So the growth, the rates will rise. We're expecting it being a little bit more slowly, but they are slowly but surely increasing throughout Latin America. And what about car rental? That's another key vertical. Fares have risen significantly, and there are several reasons for this, but generally speaking, during the pandemic, particularly in the depths of 2020, 2021, people were not flying as much, and so then there's more pressure for driving to places, or more interest in driving to locations, and also, given for the fact that there was also, some capacity issues. Car rental companies across the globe have sold off their inventory, so there's less capacity. So that also is putting pressure on fares for car rentals. And it's a story that's been, certainly across the world. Again, people maybe not flying as much, or as much international travel. So it's more the focus on domestic, and with safety reasons, oftentimes focusing on driving fares. And so I mentioned here the fleet size, the problems with fleet sizes. And we note here, fleet sizes globally are down about 30%. In the Americas, that's US and Latin America, it's down about 23%. But overall international, it's down about 44% in terms of fleet sizes. So as car rental companies they reduced the size of their fleets during the pandemic to sell off their inventory, because it wasn't necessarily being used. But now with supply chain shortages, it's more challenging to manufacture cars. Cars are much more expensive across the globe. And so it's going to take some time for the capacity to increase, but that's going to also put a lot of upwards pressure on pricing in terms of our car rental prices. And so Here we're going to look at just global rates on average, how rates are. They're expected to rise, this year about almost 4% from last year, to about almost to $39 approximately on average per day, but increasing again in 2023. We forecast up to over $40. So that the rates are rising higher than they ever were back in 2018 too. And I think that again speaks to the supply chain issues and the inventory issues as well. And Latin America certainly is following that trend. So here are some average prices, the average price of car rental throughout Latin America. Certainly it might vary by country, but average, we're expecting about this year about $30 US dollars per day for car rental in Latin America. And then increasing up again to about $30.50 in 2023. That will be the highest since the time period that we're showing here in 2018. So the sense is that higher car rental rates might be here to stay for a couple years longer. And with that, I want to thank you for attending. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to GBTA Research. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Mark, I don't know if you have any final words you'd like to share?
No, that's it. It was great to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful experience in Mexico City. Thank you very much.